Greetings, friends. You are on the channel Military Reports. And today we will discuss with you the situation in Ukraine on the 14th of June, 2024 year. A huge number of events have happened today, so let's get started. Two key points today are, of course, the G7 rally in Italy, where Zelensky was promised a lot of things, signed a lot of things with them, and so on and so forth. And of course, in contrast to this event, Vladimir Putin's statements. And today, the President of Russia, during his speeches at a meeting with the leadership of the Foreign Ministry, announced the conditions for starting negotiations with Ukraine. The most important statement of the President of the Russian Federation. There are many points here. The main ones, and most importantly, are the armed forces of Ukraine, in order to start peace negotiations. The peace process must be completely withdrawn from the territory of the DPRE and LPR, as well as the Kherson and Zaporozhye regions. And the most important detail that the President of the Russian Federation noted today is that we are not talking about those territories that are currently under the control of Russian units, but those territories that are the Kherson region, let's say, the Zaporozhye region, Donetsk, Lugansk regions in there, within their administrative borders, when they were still part of Ukraine. That is, for the concept, for clarity, we have added these territories to the map. Let's say we start with you from Kherson. Here is the Kherson region, the southern part, which is located on the Russian side of the Dnieper. Everything is clear here. This is the part of Kherson that is now flashing before your eyes on the screens. This is the part that, according to Putin's plan, should become part of the Russian Federation without, let's say, a single shot. That is, the court should roll back from these divisions further to Nikolaev, there is a crooked lesson, and so on and so forth. And these territories should be occupied by Russian units without a fight. Then we are moving with you to the Zaporozhye region. It turns out that the territory that flickers on your screens is the Zaporozhye region, part of the Zaporozhye region, which, according to Putin's plan, should also become part of the Russian Federation without a single shot being fired. And here it is worth noting, of course, the fact that the city of Zaporozhye itself, this is the regional center of the Zaporozhye region, also becomes part of the Russian Federation without a single shot being fired. And here it is very important to note that immediately it appears as an answer to the question, but for what reason were the bridges along the Dnieper not destroyed first by a special military operation? In fact, here we now have with you the answer to this question. Of course, we are following the classic, let's say, moments. This is the Donetsk region, or the Donetsk People's Republic. This is the territory that, according to Putin, who is flickering before your eyes, starting from Svyatogorsk, Dobryshev, and ending there with Velikaya Novoselovka, and including the settlements of Pokrovsk, Slavyansk, Konstantinovka, Kramatorsk, Toretsky, and other settlements, should become part of the Russian Federation without a single shot being fired. They should simply roll away from this territory in the forest. Not quite a small, let's say, a small part of the Luhansk region. There are literally several settlements along the Zherabets River, along the Seversky Donets. And here are several settlements, for which, in fact, they would be being fought now. Stelmakovka is the same, Novaya Igorovka, for which assault operations are being conducted now, Makiivka. In other words, it is quite likely that even without any agreements with Ukraine, this territory may soon come under the full control of Russian units in connection with active hostilities on this territory. In fact, the statement is very important, and here it can be viewed from several points of view. And why these territories? Why nothing else? And many, let's say, patriots of Russia are wondering why Odessa, Kharkiv, and so on and so forth are missing from this list. And here, of course, I want to understand these territories for something, what value these territories have. And, of course, I would like to answer this question from the point of view of, perhaps, some kind of currency equivalent. And I remind you that just a few days ago, a week ago in June, American Senators Lindsey Graham, if you know such a senator, Lindsey Graham, he assessed Ukraine. Or rather, there are some open sources, perhaps some American institutions investigated. Then the total cost of Ukraine, including, let's say, the old Ukraine sample 91st year. The total cost of the resources of Ukraine 91st year is estimated to be slightly less than $15 trillion. Here was published a small map where in general, let's say, the calculation of all regions is calculated. So, if we summarize with you and pay attention, let's say, according to that source that evaluated this map, we can say that, for example, The Kiev region is estimated at $21 billion, right? Let's say the Zhytomyr region is estimated at $555 billion. Let's say Lviv is worth $521 billion and Chernihiv is worth $25 billion. In other words, we see that there are some such sums. But let's say the Luhansk region is estimated at $3.2 trillion. In other words, one Luhansk region, let's say, has more deposits of natural resources, is more expensive than Kiev. But it turns out 150 times, yes, in monetary terms. Donetsk region, Donetsk People's Republic, $3.8 trillion. The Zaporozhye region, $605 billion. The Crimea, $206. And Kherson is estimated at $10 billion. Then Kherson is still like that. Well, it's important here from the point of view of geography. And the only region that, according to Putin's plan, remains part of Ukraine, and which more or less represents some kind of value, is of course, according to the old Dnipropetrovsk region, or according to the Ukrainian Dnipro region. Here, this region is estimated at $3.5 trillion. And if we sum up the total cost, we said $15 trillion, then according to Putin's plan, more than $7.5 trillion are going to Russia, that is, more than half. In the territory, which is no more than, perhaps, 20% of the whole of Ukraine. Half of the valuables and assets of the rare metals of the land, let's say, in favor of and under the jurisdiction of Russia, departs from Russia under this peace agreement. Everything else remains, well, it turns out, the same Ukraine. Chernihiv with 25 billion, Sumy region with its 62 billion, yes, Vinnytsia with its $24 billion. And so on and so forth. And here, on the basis of this, of course, we understand that, well, in fact, the requirements are so strict, yes. It would seem that even though, among other things, Ukraine needs to roll back from the territory that, well, for which even military operations were not conducted, including leaving the city of Zaporozhye, then, among other things. This is the loss of a huge amount of potential, and, in fact, after such a retreat, and recognition of, let's say, the legal right of the jurisdiction of the Russian Federation over these regions. Signing documents, lifting sanctions, of course, will lead to the fact that Ukraine itself will devalue its value is important. In the eyes of Western countries. One Dnipropetrovsk region with $3.85 trillion. But maybe it's interesting. Fabulous money in any case, but already. But this is no longer 15 trillion, you must agree. And of course, on the other hand, this is the first amount, since we discussed it with you. The second point, which is still an important point worth discussing, is of course the summit in Switzerland. Today or tomorrow, the World Summit starts in Switzerland, where all the leaders in that region gather. Well, with the exception, of course, of Joe Biden there, with the exception, of course, it's Putin, that is. The main players who, in fact, decide the peace process in Ukraine, everyone flocks there. Now they are all in Italy at the G7 rally, where they signed a large number of security agreements. A security agreement with Italy and with Japan was signed. Again, they promised a lot of things. So, in theory, this is what trolling is, what mockery is. It's a trick, it's, let's say, a joke, ridicule. According to legend, according to history, the Swiss summit, the peace summit on Ukraine-Switzerland, meant that tomorrow, today, these days, there will be 100 participants discussing one thing: peace in Ukraine. Peace in Ukraine. We planned to discuss this world there and announce a comprehensive declaration with everyone in different poses, in different ways, in different states, in different corners, and talk only about peace in Ukraine. But as a result of the fact that Vladimir Putin has proposed his plan, of course, tomorrow everyone will talk only about one thing. About the war. About the war with Russia. Despite the fact that tomorrow is the day of peace in Ukraine, tomorrow will be the day of war with Russia. Tomorrow they will discuss everything without exception, in different poses, in the same places, the same corners, and in different states. No, in no case will we fight to the last. We will give more money, more weapons, we will send soldiers. We will send everyone, we will win everyone, and they will only talk, of course, about the war. Well, here's an interesting story. And, of course, the most important thing was when I first heard the news that Vladimir Putin had proposed peace talks. despite the fact that the conditions were really tough. We must clearly understand that it is not just to stop at the line of contact that are located. It is to retreat and give even more, so as not to give even more later. So, when I first heard about this plan, the first thing that came to my mind, to be honest, was the situation in Solidarity on. In the Christmas truce of the 23rd year, when Putin proposed, let's say, a peaceful ceasefire for a while. During Christian holidays, during Christmas, and the Russian country allegedly complied with the terms of this truce. At least so it was spread in the media. Then after this peaceful, let's say, a small pause on the part of the Russian. We see the armies and how it all ended. The fall of Solidar, the breakthrough of the defense, the capture of the SS, consequences of Bakhmuta. And this was the first such serious blow to the USU, after which, so far in principle, they have not been able to move away from USU. Therefore, when I repeat again, when Putin talks about peace, we must either accept or prepare for even more terrible consequences and moments that we are now seeing on the territory of the line of contact. Well, now let's move on to the actual line of contact. Today there is a huge amount of news, a huge amount, just a tremendous promotion. And we will start with you, of course, from the South Donetsk direction, and from the settlement of Georgiivka. Here is this Georgiivka. We remember with you who follow, let's say, the reports, we remember with you that this area was in the gray zone for a long time. There was daily news that Russian units had established control, but there was not a single geolocation confirming this. There were shots, and already in the morning information began to arrive, even in the evening, that everything, completely Georgiivka, is under the control of the Russian Federation. But we waited, and today Ukrainian sources did not make us wait long. Today is the 46th, apparently already in fact being in some kind of despair, in a panic, they just published the footage. Just hundreds of a single tank assault, if you can call it that, of a settlement, a breakthrough in a settlement. Taking control not only of Georgiivka, including an exit to the eastern outskirts of Maximiliivka. This is where one series of strikes on Russian equipment was recorded, but it moved on and the extreme point was recorded here, where the Russian units managed to enter the advanced assault squad, and this is the settlement of Maximiliivka. That's it. Here it rained down much more terrifyingly and uncontrollably than everyone assumed in principle. Russian units began to storm the next point, and this is the last point on the way to the settlement of Kurakova. Kurakova is essentially the heart of the South Donetsk defense. What is there? Assault operations are underway. In the near future, these fights will only be. The intensity of the fighting will only increase. We have seen a lot. There was a long pause here. No news for a month. In a month, as I understand it, we managed to patch up all the holes, and tighten the holes, and give a rest, hold a rotation. And now a serious offensive has begun right on Kurakov. The fall of Maximiliivka, if there are fresh forces on the offensive, can also lead to very, very sad consequences. Both for Konstantinovka, for Uglidar, and for the great Novoseliovka, of course, so for the whole direction itself. Then we are moving with you a little further north to the Krasnogorovka area. Fighting continues here. Russian units have published footage of assault operations in the village itself. In these frames, we can observe the drone flyby with you in the central part of the settlement of Krasnogorovka. And here we see artillery strikes. And after a moment, we begin to watch, to observe the actions of the Russian attack aircraft. Russian units are trying to clean up another high-rise. In large numbers, Russian soldiers are moving from one entrance to another, trying to enter without risking their lives as much as possible. In other words, based on these frames, we have updated the maps as a whole. Here we painted over a small area along the central street. In other words, the battles for the skyscrapers continue, but in general, the situation for the eastern citadel. I remind you that Krasnogorka has its own, let's say, citadel. Here it is. And based on these shots, we see with you that the situation for the AFU units in this area is becoming extremely critical. Especially since today, among other things, in addition to advancing here, information has been received from some more or less, let's say, reliable cartographers that Russian units, among other things, managed to break through the defense and on the northern part and establish control over this territory. That is, from all of this, it can be summed up and summarized that, well, at least this citadel is already in some kind of semicircle. Perhaps in the near future, perhaps in the next night, the Apu will be forced to begin a retreat. We are moving further north, in the direction of Novolsky. Today, individual sources confirm the complete capture of the settlement, the cutting of this artillery pocket, and, in general, the court continues to retreat to the west in the direction of Pokrovskaya, Selidova, and so on and so forth. Important news continues to arrive just on a daily basis from the west of Avdiivka. Let me remind you of the general situation. There are several sections of the front that are not confirmed by control, but which have already been discussed by various cartographers. Here is a bridgehead to the north of the Babaki beam. This is where some movement was noted at the time. What happened next with this bridgehead is unclear. We keep the territory as it is. This promotion is confirmed by the pro-Ukrainian deep state. Today, Russian units broke through the defense. They didn't even break through, most likely they just reduced, let's say, leveled the front line from Novopokrovsky to Uman. Here, footage of a large-scale offensive of Russian units as part of a large tank column was also published across the fields. A large number of landing vehicles were moving towards Novoselovka first. The Apu tried to fight back. To be more precise, in the frames we can observe with you the emblem of the 68th Yager Brigade. Here they are standing here, who also suffered heavy losses during previous battles. But let's just say the geolocations are fixed here. This is what we managed to geolocate and notice from the footage published by the armed forces of Ukraine. There is an extremely high probability that during this offensive, Russian units managed to enter even the eastern outskirts of the settlement itself. There is also an offensive along the Novopokrovskaya-Novoselovka first line, and there is one here. Progress is also noted, at least control over this area is confirmed by pro-Ukrainian sources, pro-Ukrainian deep state cartographers. But so far there is no confirmation for this particular site. But in general, everything suggests that this is indeed the case, and there is indeed such an advance, and in the near future, battles will begin on the territory of the settlement itself. Today, we have received confirmation of the promotion of the Russian divisions of Novoalexandrovka. We remember that for a very long time, for quite a long time, we kept almost the entire Novoalexandrovka, plus a support in the east, plus a support in the south in the gray zone, since there were some shots from the same deep state, from the same pro-Ukrainian sources, but there were none. Well, that is, the maps were simply updated, but it was not clear on the basis of what all these updates are happening. And today, the final shots were published. In these frames, according to the author of this video, the positions of Russian units in Novoalexandrovka itself are being scouted. That is, the Ukrainian drone melts over the almost destroyed to the ground Novoalexandrovki. Trying to identify possible positions of Russian units, sees nothing. Everyone is sitting in the basements, everyone is waiting for the arrival of night, no one is sticking out anywhere. Everyone is waiting for some orders, reinforcements. And then, for a second, for a moment, a Ukrainian drone captures movement on the ground. Some Russian soldier may have needed to go somewhere urgently. And he urgently needed somewhere runs, starts to follow her, trying to figure out where this soldier will eventually come running. As a result, he ran somewhere, and most likely that's why they started hitting where he ran somewhere, but in general, these shots were shot right here. It was along this road that the Russian fighter ran, and as a result of everything, he went into this building. That is, based on these shots, we assumed and concluded that indeed the whole of Novoalexandrovka is under the control of Russian units, and most likely, including in the dam area. We also received news about this, but so far we are not climbing further with updates, as we are waiting for more reliable sources and more reliable information. Next, we are moving with you to the watch direction. It's as quiet as ever, no changes for. Gradually, battles are being waged for, say, often Russian drones are working in the Yarskaya citadel, Shiplatovs are working. Here in general, everything seems to be going according to plan. There is no hurry for Russian units here. Everything is clear here. The Eastern Chaser will go sooner or later, but it makes sense now, let's say, to lose personnel, to lose, let's say, infantry. If it's easier to strike, if it's easier to work with drones, and now no one is driving in the back. Well, as if the work is calm, let's say, a measured attempt to squeeze out the APU from this part. But in USU, in turn, they are not in a hurry. Razdalovka. Of course, we remember about this site. Yesterday, we started talking about the fact that advanced Russian units have gained a foothold on the first streets. Fighting is underway. Today, we received a continuation of this news that there are really fights in Razdalovka. During the day, footage was published of Russian drones striking positions in Krasinsk, conducting a sweep. And of course, the most important thing is not just information from Russian sources. I would like to get, let's say, some confirmation from pro-Ukrainian sources, and we have received these confirmations. Today, Deep State has updated its map, indicating here is the Russian promotion. Let's say that what is in this gray zone, in this cloud, is that according to the Deep State, including under the control of Russian units, the territory that has no color is a gray zone. And it has not yet been determined here, either military operations are underway, or in the near future as well will get the appropriate color. There is no news on the north. The assault operations of Verkhnykamiensky are underway. Russian drones are cleaning up, preparing a springboard for an operation on the ground. And I remind you that the main support point, located in the eastern Verkhnykamiensky, is under full control. And now, gradually, Russian units are trying to advance through the village itself, in the direction of the north. But there has not been any overbreaking, any over-the-top news. That is, some regular work is also being carried out. Interesting shots obtained from Torsky. There has been some kind of operational pause here for quite a long time. Already starting today, the Russian artillery has been working very closely since the last days. The aviation is working very closely. And it seems that a new attempt of an assault is about to begin here in order to cut the direction into two parts. For example, the northern one is Yampolovka, Toretskaya, Novosadova, Nevsky and Makievka. And the southern one is already Yampol itself and Kremeny forests. And other villages that are located along the Seversky Donetsk River. Well, something like that will be possible. In the North Kupinsk direction, over the past day, we have seen with you practically no news of either location or personnel. That is, there is some kind of pause here. Perhaps, well, in the past days, there have been a lot of assaults, a lot of operations. It was possible to take control of a large number of territories, so perhaps there is some kind of operational pause here now. In the North Kharkiv direction, we have literally discussed with you that Ukrainians are very quickly able to restore, say, crossings along, say, the reservoir between, in the area of the settlement of Old Saltev. And this is the third time the crossing has been restored. Here the footage is published that during the third attempt to restore it, it seems to have succeeded, but then again, this crossing was destroyed. That is, since the 10th of May, the crossing in the area of Old Saltev has been restored 3 times. And it has already been destroyed 3 times. But this is at least what was published from geolocation, what we saw. Perhaps it happens much more often there. Perhaps they restore it almost every day, and it is not the Russian side that destroys it every day. In Volchansk, very interesting information is coming to us today from the same Volchansk aggregate plant. We remember with you that the pro-Ukrainian cartographers painted the territories 60-70% under the colors of the Russian army. The citadel is under the control of Ukrainian units. There are articles here. And that's where the fun begins. What? Why? How can it be that here, say, Lupus is red, the aggregate plant is red, and the territories between, say, that citadel and the bridge are in the gray zone, or something like that? So, today, we received a lot of interesting information from both the Ukrainian side and the Russian side. Let's get into the details. Yes, indeed, everyone confirms that Russian units are located at the Volchansk aggregate plant, in view of the assault actions. They are trying to expand the control zone. But it turns out that there is another very interesting information, that the 71st Yager Brigade is standing in the citadel. The Ukrainian citadel. They are sitting in the citadel. Of course, not all of this brigade as a whole, perhaps 100 or 200 personnel, maybe more. Plus or minus, it's hard to say, maybe 50. Well, more than 200 or 300 are sitting in these citadels. In this citadel in the basements. And what kind of situation happened? According to Russian sources, due to the fact that the Russian units managed to get to the aggregate plant, it turned out that the APU in the citadel surrounded the 71st Brigade, got into the boiler. They can't get out of here, they can't break out. Let's say you don't have to go somewhere to the east over the bridge. But here everything is being shot through, controlled, and a cauldron has formed as a whole. Boiler, mini boiler. And today, According to the summary of the North Group of Forces, the units in the issue of the 71st Jager Brigade have repeatedly, to be more precise, made 3 attempts and made counteroffensives, and tried to make a breakthrough in the direction of the west and southwest. That is, somehow, like this, Ukrainian units tried to break through in 3 groups of 90 people each. However, the Russian units inflicted a defeat there, a blow, and so on and so forth. All attacks were repulsed and, having lost 50 personnel, the 71st Brigade rolled back to the citadel. In other words, this is the official position of the Russian side. The Ukrainian side speaks a little differently. The Ukrainians say that during the assault operations, the Russian advanced units managed to enter the Volchansky aggregate plant, begin cleaning, securing, after which the Ukrainian I-71st Brigades began to beat in the western, southwestern direction. In fact, broke through the defense and surrounded the Russian units inside the Volchansky aggregate plant. That is, of course, it's up to you to figure out who to trust, which country to trust, which not. But here we see some two double-edged boilers. The Ukrainian units of the 71st Brigade were stuck, in fact, in the citadel. Russian units, according to even some, well, understanding of some indirect, may have fallen into some kind of environment, possibly operational in the Volchansk aggregate plant itself. And neither one nor the second country can fail to continue, not to break out, until something serious changes. It is a very interesting situation that it is possible that one and the second news is wrong, but in general, you should understand that yes, there really is a presence, there is a presence in the citadel. The 71st is the Russian Volchansky unit, but this territory between the 2 citadels is in fact already unclear here. Because everyone understands, as a Ukrainian country, so Russian, that now this block, these low buildings, the Lyceum of the 2nd, everything that is between the citadel is the most important territory. Whoever controls these ruins here has, in fact, won the battle for northern Volchansk, since the citadel without supplies, without, say, these routes, will not stand there for 1 or 2 days, and will have to be created sooner, or go for a bloody breakthrough, which is likely to be. Then we are moving with you to the Liptsovsky direction. There is also a lot of interesting information here. And here the most important information that goes all along the red line through all Ukrainian channels is relatives because of, let's say, fighters, soldiers of the 3rd Battalion of the 42nd Mechanized Brigade began to look for all their fathers, sons, brothers and so on, cousins, uncles and so on and so forth. Because lost. The 3rd Battalion was wiped off the face of the earth. Well, from the information that is now available on the internet, the 3rd Battalion of the 42nd Mechanized Brigade was simply wiped off the face of the earth. Simple. Just as, let's say, it was worn down during the attempts to attack Gluboko. We have repeatedly discussed them. There were attempts to storm, and that's it. Now their 42nd has been replaced by the 13th Brigade, and they are storming it, somehow trying to do this with a Macker. But no results of new offensive attempts have been reported yet. It was possible to do something, or it was not possible. And of course, we are coming back, or rather we are ending our conversation with a missile strike that was inflicted on the territory of Ukraine today. Drones, ballistics, drones, cruise missiles flew, and of course, the main goal was Starokonstantinov, western Ukraine. And possible airfields, basing, say, Storm Shadow carriers, Scalpel, and of course the F-16. Everything that flew, eventually flew there, but as long as the results of the strikes are not clear to us how it ended. But in any case, all these strikes indicate one thing, that there is an extremely low probability that they will not come to the 16th. They will be handed over, but there is an extremely low probability that they will take off from airfields in Ukraine on the 16th. Most likely, there will be a further escalation, and there is an extremely high probability. It's just that now they are deciding the question from the countries of which states the F-16s will take off to be applied there, to work on the territory of Ukraine against Russian units.